So, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back for Apex 2023 Istanbul Conference, day one afternoon session. We hope you enjoyed lunch. So, as promised, we're going to have a special session as we begin the afternoon session. So, to lead this session and share his special remarks, please welcome once again our chairman, Mr. Stu Bressler. Stu?
Thank you, Mustafa. I asked Mustafa if I could come up just to introduce this special session following our lunch today, which I hope you really enjoyed as much as I did. You know, we have bright sparks, spotlights throughout our conference, and we're trying something a little bit new today, kind of last minute, if you will. We're going to spotlight one of our new members. The Ukraine Power Exchange has joined APEX as of the last several months, and we are privileged today to have the CEO of the Ukraine Power Exchange, Mr. Alexander Hava, with us today, who made the difficult trip down from Ukraine to be with us for our conference. And he has graciously agreed to say a few words about some of the challenges they are experiencing given the ongoing war in Ukraine with respect to their energy markets in general. So we are privileged to have Alexander with us. He's going to sit down with my fellow Apex board member, Lina Myasalin, to have a conversation about some of these challenges after his presentation. So if you would please, a warm welcome for Alexander and Lina.
If you stand, you will have to use the, well,
It works? Yeah, perfect. So, Alexander, sit down. So, as it was already mentioned by Stu, our chairman, it's our greatest pleasure to welcome our newest member from Ukraine, from Joint Stock Company Market Operator here in Istanbul. And it was already mentioned, it was extraordinary trip for them. As we all know, they are in a very unique, special situation at the moment. And I had a pleasure to visit himself as well as our institutions in Ukraine almost 2.5 months ago. So I was myself in Kiev, and I can really sympathize that the traveling is a big challenge, traveling from Kiev. But very warm welcome to our Ukrainian colleagues, and I just would like to give him a word to say a few words about the company itself. And then afterwards, we will just have a few questions. So go ahead.
Thank you, Lina. I hope that you can hear me. So first of all, I would like to thank you for such opportunity for us to take part in such conference. It's very important for Ukraine to be the part of the worldwide association of power exchange, and we are very glad to be the part of that. It's very important for Ukraine to be involved in international processes of development of energy market, especially energy market, because it's very important for Ukraine, especially of the question of security of supply. So thank you for such opportunity. Thank you for Lina that was involved us in such processes. It's very important for us. I would like to say a few words about our company, what we do, and
yeah, I think we should have some slides here.
So
here we are.
we call market operator. It's simple, and we operate spot market in Ukraine. So it's our main goal and the activity that we do. We work since 2019 when the Ukrainian market was changed to the model that operate in Europe. So the rules that we used is the same like in Europe, and the processes are mostly the same. Maybe some numbers about us. So we operate day-ahead and intraday market. We made data analysis also for our market participants and take a lot of attention on that. So that's why the topics that was raised today is very important for us. Thank you for such information. There is a numbers that you can see on the slide about the volumes that we operate and the volumes of the money also, and the share of the day-ahead market in Ukraine and the numbers of market participants. So maybe some words about our main goal. We, like Ukraine, think that the main goal for us should to be involving in the processes that already worked in European Union. So that's why we, like the market operators, say that we should to be the part of single day-ahead coupling and single intraday coupling that are already worked in Europe. So the main idea that it's the best way for us, like Ukraine, not to create something new, something special, but just to be the part of that mechanism that already worked in Europe, because they are already explored, so we can use that.
I think that goal is it's very obvious, and it's at least within the European territory. We talk a lot about the integration of Ukraine into the single energy market. What would be the first steps? What do you think is the most important first step to get to European market? Is it changing the legislation or anything else on your side?
Yeah, like usual in energy sector legislation, and especially special regulation that we have, like as I understand, in another world, is very important. So that's why the first step that we now provide is the changing of internal legislation in Ukraine, and we, like the market operator, provide our ideas to our parliament, to our national energy regulator, etc. So the main idea that to create something new that was already implemented in other countries, the main thing that you should to do is to study your internal market participants, how it's worked, and after that it will be much easier to implement something. So that's why we do our homework, and after that we'll be the part of single day-ahead coupling and intraday coupling also.
We hope so as well. And then maybe just to wrap up our discussion, I would like you to share your experiences in actually operating under that extreme situation that Ukraine is in. So maybe some words of what happened on that day in February, and how do you operate since then?
Yeah, so I have the slide that is shown here. It's the volumes of our market that we have since 2019. As you see, on 24th of February, the main problem that we obtained, excluding the issues of the war, was the lack of liquidity on the market. So we understand that our market participants don't know what to do, and that's why we have the experience, and I can share if you want after the meeting, about the special steps that we provide to our market to survive that. Yes. So the main thing and the main question that can market operate at such condition, and we answer for that yes, and we even have to provide the market like obligation, but with some restrictions, and these were the price caps on our spot platforms, like the day-ahead market and the intraday market, and there were other regulatory restrictions like prohibition for sale on the day-ahead market for traders, etc. But the main thing that I would like to discuss, or I would like to share, that in the cases of the breach of the security of supply, maybe the market can be the answer, and also the answer can be the implementation, or international exchange of electricity, energy and gas and other energy resources. So in these cases, if you have troubles, maybe you should not to close your borders, but open that, because the number of instruments that you can use for your security of supply which will be much higher. So that's why it's the experience that we have, and I just want to remember that we have the war even now, and we operate our market. And that's why I raise such question, that it's very important to be ready for such things. It may be not only the war, but other issues that we can obtain. So that's why it's very important to raise the question of the security of supply and to prepare for such thing, especially if you are power exchange and you need to find out the answers for your market participants, how market will operate in such conditions. Thank you.
Thanks a lot. So we welcome one more time our Ukrainian colleagues to the team, and yes, thanks everyone for your attention.
Thank you.
Thank you, Lena. Thank you very much. Such a great pleasure. Alexander, thank you very much. So, with a bigger round of applause, let's give a warm welcome once again for Ukraine. Ladies and gentlemen, please put your hands together. So we would like to thank Lena and our new member, the CEO of Market Operator in Ukraine, Alexander Hava, once again. So, ladies and gentlemen, now as we continue with the afternoon session of day one of our conference, bright sparks with a strong interest in the energy sector will continue to contribute to discussions with our distinguished participants. And now to make his presentation, please give it up for Assistant Manager of Central Power Purchasing Agency, CPPAG, Mr. Mohammed Asif. Mr. Asif. Almost ready. Hazırız. Thank you. Ahmed?
Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Iyyaka na'budu wa iyyaka nasta'in. In the name of Allah, who is the most beneficent and the most merciful. You alone we worship, and you alone we ask for help. Honorable Chair, distinguished board members, and honorable guests, good afternoon. My name is Muhammad Adil Asif, and I am from Central Power Purchasing Agency of Pakistan. Pakistan is a land of opportunity, a land of diversity, and a land of hope. Pakistan is a country with rich history and culture. It is home to the world's second largest Muslim population and is a melting point of cultures from all across the globe. Pakistan is also a country of natural beauty, with stunning mountains, lush green forests, and beautiful beaches. But Pakistan is more than just history, culture, and beauty. It is a land of bright future. Pakistan is a young country with a median age of 22 years, which means it has a lot of young, talented people which are eager to learn and to contribute towards the country's progression. Central Power Purchasing Agency is the market operator of Pakistan, one of the most modern power sector entities of Pakistan, with a special emphasis on the development of people, process, and technology. CPPAG is leading the development of new culture in the power sector, emphasizing on the development of young leaders and to provide them with national and international platforms to develop themselves. CPPA, being the market operator, is facilitating the power transition from the current single buyer model to a wholesale liberalized electricity market, which will be changing the market model. The overall strategy is to bring efficiency and competition in generation and consumption end, while the transmission and the distribution wire network will remain regulated as they are natural monopolies. One of the best things that I love about my job is the passion we all share on all levels, and it is with respect to the cause of reforms. Reforms is a difficult thing. An inspirational story in this regard is of Chile. One of the most inspiring aspects of the Chile story is the way in which the market has benefited the customers. Since the launch, electricity markets has fallen by a huge percentage, and it has also brought transparency and reliability. This had also impacted a significant impact on the life of Chileans who have seen their energy bills decrease significantly. The Chilean story is an inspiration to all the countries that are willing to launch electricity market, as it shows that markets can be a successful way to reform the electricity sectors and eventually benefiting the consumers. We came across wonderful success stories during the course of our research and development phase. We got an opportunity to connect with the people who were involved in the groundwork of these reforms in their respective countries. Their optimism and can-do attitude inspired us to go beyond the perceived limitations and local challenges and to deliver for Pakistan. When I joined CPPA, the high level and the detailed design of the markets were approved. After joining, I was part of the team that developed the market commercial code. After the approval of the commercial code, the main task was to automate all the processes that have been mentioned in the codes. Now let me share my personal experience. The automation of commercial code required an advanced power trade platform, which was necessary for the efficient and transparent operations, which are the fundamentals of every market. Our team coordinated with various counterparts across the globe, including EPIAS, ERCOT, AESO, NYISO, CCE, to create a system which is tailored to the specific requirements of our market. As you know, there are two main options when it comes to acquire a new solution. You can either buy it or build it by yourself. There are pros and cons to both approaches. Buying an existing platform would have been the faster and easier option for us, but it would have limited us with the features and functionality of that platform. As you know, the localization is a key aspect of this platform. In the end, we decided to build our own platform. It was an extremely difficult decision, but it was the best way to ensure that we get the required localized platform as per our needs. This platform, the market management system, is an advanced tailor-made software to meet the design specifically for the electricity market of Pakistan. It has a number of modules like registration module, bilateral contracts module, balancing mechanism of energy and capacity, and some other modules like that. The MMS is a powerful tool that helped us automate the code and improve the efficiency and transparency of our market. It is a testament to the hard work of our team that we were able to build this platform in-house. The same application, if procured from the third vendor, could have cost millions of foreign exchange, but I feel extremely proud that we have built this in-house with our local Pakistani engineers and IT experts, which have saved more than 800 million rupees. And I'm also proud to say that I have played a key role in the development of that system. After the issuance of the markets operator license by the regulator to the CPPA, a test run period initiated back in 2002 to test the readiness of people, process, and technology. During the course of that period, we executed 13 monthly settlement statements, 1 annual settlement statement for the balancing mechanism of capacity, calculated the firm capacity certificates for the generations, and till now we have settled more than 171 terawatts of energy. Now talking about the experience of Apex Bright Spark program. As a part of this program, I was honored to attend this conference, and along with that, I was also able to visit EPIAS and TIAS. My visit to TIAS was very enlightening. I learned a lot about their operating procedures and working style, and why EPIAS is leading innovation in the Turkish market. The journey has also inspired me to reflect upon the most optimal way in which Pakistan can transit from the current market structure to a day-ahead, intraday, and spot market architectures. This was further complemented by the elaborative Q&A session where the subject matter experts engaged with us. My visit to TIAS was also very informative. I learned a lot about the Turkish system operator and how cross-border links works. I was amazed. I am grateful for this opportunity. Finally, we also had the opportunity to visit Hagia Sophia and Basilica. I must say they are one of the most beautiful architectures that I have visited. We also had the opportunity to visit some authentic Turkish cuisines, which are very delicious, by the way. My overall experience as a Apex Bright Spark was incredibly positive. I learned a lot, met a lot of people, and had a lot of fun. I am confident that the skills and knowledge I gained through this Apex Bright Spark program will help me make a real difference. I aspire to extend my efforts beyond the confines of my organization and disseminate the knowledge to a wider audience. As a market operator, our company has a crucial mandate to provide comprehensive training sessions of the liberalized competitive markets to our stakeholders, which include more than 18 power sector entities. One of our flagship initiatives is the Electricity Market Professionals Program, where I serve as a trainer. By leveraging this platform, I aim to share valuable insights gained from the Apex 2023 with the stakeholders outside my company, thereby reaching and benefiting a broader range of participants. We have also recently developed an international training program in collaboration with Apex named Electricity Market Training Professional Programs to discuss the fundamental concepts related to the market. On behalf of Apex, I would highly encourage our distinguished guests to explore the program and join us on this journey of mutual learning. I'm confident that the Apex 2023 will have a lasting impact on the global electricity industry. The insight and the ideas that are shared here will help us shape a more sustainable, equitable, and prosperous future for all of us. Here, I would also like to acknowledge the continuous efforts of Mr. Stu and all the other board members for bringing all the great minds across the globe. I would also like like to thank our inspirational mentor, Mr. Umar Haroon Malik, who is also the head of the market operations in Pakistan, for always giving a confidence to young minds like myself to learn, express, and conquer. In the end, I would also like to give a shout out to the team that is sitting behind home, that I think hopefully will be watching me right now, who have also played an important role in this journey of market liberalization. Thank you everyone. Have a great day.
Mr. Mohammed Asif, thank you very much for your presentation. It was a great pleasure. So, ladies and gentlemen, this is going to be the panel number 2, the second and the last panel of the day. But I would just like to find out the energy level in the room. Are we ready? Are you ready? Okay, so I'm going to be inviting our moderator and panelists for the second panel of the day. The panel will be discussing the markets and exchanges facilitating the energy transition, flexibility, renewables, and technologies. First and foremost, our moderator representing Coordinador Eléctrico Nacional, Mr. Juan Carlos Olmedo. Mr. Olmedo. And our distinguished panelists, starting with representing N Dimensions, Dr. Jeffrey Chapman. Dr. Chapman. And from Hitachi Energy, Mr. Mohit Saigal. Representing PJM Interconnection, Mr. Timothy Horger. And last but not the least, representing Market Reform, Mr. Todd Bessemer. Mr. Olmedo, gentlemen, the floor is yours, sir.
Resilient energy transition to reach a carbon neutral world. We will focus on power grid flexibility needs and changing resources scenario, and focus on market incentives for ancillary services such as frequency regulation, voltage support, and ramping capabilities. This panel has 4 experts of recognized experience in markets and exchanges. Then I think this will be a fruitful discussion about the future of energy market. First of all, we will start with a presentation of Tim Horger regarding flexibility in markets. Please, Tim.
Good afternoon. My name's Tim Horger. There you go. I should know this. Good afternoon. My name's Tim Horger. I work at PJM Interconnection. I'm a director in the markets area at PJM. It's a delight to be back at Apex again to discuss a topic we've discussed many times, or at least the last several years, is the change in our environment or resources, and this panel is definitely a good one to be on. So what I'd like to discuss today in my presentation when it comes up, I want to first very briefly discuss some statistics within PJM, a summary of some of the operational challenges we have at PJM, where we are going at PJM, and what the future would be. It's a short 10-minute presentation. I'd like to have more discussions afterwards of some of the results and solutions that we're looking at going forward. Go to the next slide. All right, while we're waiting for the clicker. The next slide is basically statistics from PJM. Thank you. I think what I want you to get out of this slide is that PJM has a large footprint. We have an extremely large customer base. Over 165,000 is our peak load, which is significant. It definitely brings challenges, but it's also of lesson as we have different type of technology and resources to help with the transition and day-to-day operation. I think part of our largest challenge is the member companies, as you see up on the top there. We have over 1,000. Can just imagine a stakeholder process which PJM facilitates between different technology types, whether you have generators, load-serving entities, and suppliers. It's practically impossible to get an agreement on anything. So that is definitely the biggest challenge within PJM. Where we are today and where we're going. So the one thing to take out of this slide is if you look at on the left, the existing installed capacity, PJM renewables is only about 7-8%. If you include nuclear as far as carbon-free, we're up over 20%. And what I gather from that, and I look at the folks in the room and realize that every one of us is in a different place in this energy transition. PJM, we're still like in the starting part of this. As you can see on the right there in our interconnection queue, it's almost all renewables. It's almost all moving towards carbon-free, which is great, but we are going to have a challenge to get there. And I think within the room here, there's many different exchanges where you might be 90% there, 100% there, but we all have challenges and we're all dealing with that. So hopefully we can work together and come up with some good ideas together here. Some of the challenges we are having at PJM are like many of the same challenges that others have. I'll go back there. One slide ahead. There we go. Intermittent resources, flexibility is definitely a concern. We need to provide the correct incentives for flexibility. That is something that we're experiencing now as we have more intermittent resources come into the system. Thermal generators are constantly retiring. Coal is pretty much non-existent or will be non-existent in PJM. But we have the government that comes into play where there's these renewable standards within certain states at PJM that have to be met by certain years. So the states have a lot of pressure on them to push for renewables too, which is great, but it does obviously bring a challenge. One of the other challenges we have as far as load growth rate is we're seeing a lot like data centers. We've seen areas within PJM, in our southern part of PJM, where you have massive amounts of data centers, whether they be for Amazon, whether they be for Bitcoin mining, different areas there that they're coming on the system very frequently, and we're having trouble keeping up with that from a transmission perspective, forecasting perspective. But we can actually utilize that, and we can discuss that later, to actually help with some of the challenges we were having there. And then lastly, just acquiring those essential reliability services. That's more of an immediate term need that PJM has been focusing on as far as the voltage, frequency support, and ramping capability. So some of the key focus areas that PJM has been involved in with our stakeholders, we want to make sure that the capacity value of these generators is properly accounted for. As far as the technology type and going forward, what we can expect to actually receive from them from an energy perspective. So we're trying to incorporate that into our future capacity type market to make sure that the value, the contribution of these resources are appropriately measured. We want to ensure there's flexibilities, incentives for flexibility. We truly believe that if the price signals are correct in the market and we can provide those, the technology, the resources will come. They'll provide the proper benefit there. We're also looking at like strategic regional transmission or technology type enhancements. I heard earlier about dynamic line ratings, information like that, any technology types that could help with some of this transition. We also need to work work closely with our regulators. There could be potential reliability standards that need to be reviewed and enhanced one way or another. And then certainly the uncertainty in our load forecasts and ramping needs is something that we're looking at from day to day. So that's all I really have. I don't want to go through much of these solutions. It's more of a teaser of some of the things that we're looking at in the PJM market. Some of these we've been looking at for several years. But we're hoping to, between these type of potential solutions and other ones from our stakeholders and partners, that we can hopefully move through this transition. So that's all I have, Juan Carlos.
Thank you very much. You have been very effective. Well, as you mentioned, flexibility is a key driver for energy transition. And now I want to introduce Jeff that will talk about how financial systems are supporting the market-based renewable ecosystem.
Hi all. Pleasure to be here. And I want to echo Stu in saying that during the time when we couldn't meet in person, it was kind of a real wrench not to be able to see everybody once a year and really get energized the way we do when we all get together to talk. So I remember I was talking to my son one day, and he said, "Dad, kids at school ask me what you do, and I have no idea how to tell them." So it's good to be able to talk shop with folks that understand the problems and the things that we face. So what I'm going to do today is to back up a little bit. We're going to talk about some practical issues about, we have the PJMs and the CALISOs of the world that are well developed and very complex markets. But in a lot of markets, the idea of ramping up a big component of renewable energy is something that involves actually creating new products and altering the structure of your market. And so from the practical standpoint of how you get that done, that's kind of how I'm going to focus this discussion. So what does motivate the types of complexity that pops up when you try and incorporate incentives and renewable energy penetration? You see a lot of these things, and I'm just going to hit the high level, the sub-hourly markets, where you reduce the settlement interval so that your renewable energies can be closer to their forecasts. New ancillary service products to provide opportunity for storage, and of course we've discussed that. Flexible reserve markets, which is a big piece of how you manage to preserve flexibility when you have more and more penetration of renewable. Operational capacity products to try and maintain a base of reliable units that you can call on when you need to, and other options that preserve reliability, like peak shaving, dynamic load, and those sorts of things. And then more accurate, more transparent price signals, okay? To support transmission, green energy, flexible generation, all those things that add up to the puzzle. I have an obtuse statement that I make sometimes that says that if people can't understand a price signal, then it's not an incentive. So you need to make sure that the costs and the benefits are incorporated and as transparent as possible in the pricing that gets out to the market. So, but now we have to ask a question, because for us, we do settlements. And settlements, I say without a hint of modesty, is where the rubber meets the road. Everything eventually winds up in settlements. So it behooves us all to think about how these things get settled. And the situation is that you have this exponential, and by that I mean actual exponential growth in the amount of data that you have to manage, not what they say on the nightly news, but actual exponential growth, which means doubling and then doubling again. So you have tendency for more market intervals, more products, more complexity. That means you're going to have more demands on what goes out to the market in terms of information and also the transfer of money. More data, more complex calculations, more integration issues that come up, and more demand on your systems. So when you think about it, whatever may be happening in a market that doesn't have these products in place today, those processes tend not to get it done. So you need to plan ahead. You need to think about settlements as part of your market design and not as an afterthought, because if you don't do that, then you're chasing your tail to the extent that the money is where eventually all the market signals come out. So don't get behind the growth curve, because if you do, you'll be tempted to add staff to try and make up for the increase in volume, but the volume's increasing exponentially. So you need to think about your system so that your existing staff can multiply their efficiency and follow that exponential curve rather than having a curve that's growing linearly depending on the staff you can add with hard-to-find skill sets. Automate. We do a lot of this. There's a lot of business process behind it. There's a lot of thought that has to go into it so that you can automate the day-to-day tasking, the nuts and bolts that have to go on in order to produce a statement every day or every week, an invoice every month, handle disputes, handle adjustments, handle price changes, all of those things, and to do that in a way that's auditable so that your market participants know what went on, what went into a statement, and if there were price changes, if there were adjustments, how those adjustments got made. This is very important. Otherwise, the market can collapse under its own weight. So we say the 5 pillars of long-term value. And again, these are generalities of how you look at supporting a system. You need something that's flexible because your markets are evolving. You need something that's scalable because you're facing that exponential growth. You need something that's maintainable because you can't afford to have your systems down while you change out or update your code or whatever is involved in the year-to-year management of your IT infrastructure. You need availability because, again, one of the nightmares that I used to have periodically was from a market launch activity where we had some systems that didn't come online when we needed to, and we were working 7 days a week just to manage the data flow. Because every day the data comes in, and every day that it doesn't go out, more data comes in. So, and finally, auditability, which is another word in some ways. First off, your regulators are going to demand that, but also your market participants need to be able to track the who, what, when, and why for all the data and all the settlements you push out. So if your current systems aren't going to be able to do that over the course of a market evolution that involves a tenfold increase in the amount of data you're managing, then you need to look at that sooner rather than later. And that, I think I finished in 10 minutes.
No, less than.
So this is our skyline that we're very blessed to have out there in the Bay Area. And we're a company that specializes and concentrates on market settlements for energy market operators and large participants. We've been doing this for 20 years now. So just to pass along some of the things that a market operator can face in the face of an exponential increase in both their penetration of renewables, but also in the complexity of their markets. And with that, thank you very much.
Thank you, Jeff. You have mentioned a very important issue in power market, that is the financial sustainability. There is not only technical issues, but it's very relevant, the financial sustainability in the long term. Thank you. Now, Mohit Saigal will talk about flexibility in power system of the future.
Okay. Good afternoon. My name is Mohit Saigal, and I lead business development for electricity market solutions at Hitachi Energy. Most have heard Hitachi Energy. We're basically a chunk of the ABB, what it was the Power Grids division, and we were bought by Hitachi a few years back, and now we're fully integrated and rebranded as Hitachi Energy. Thanks to Exist and Apex for hosting this year's Apex conference in this beautiful city of Istanbul. A gorgeous location, beautiful people. And over the years, it's been a pleasure to wander the earth in such wonderful locations. I guess you could call it our own little wanderlust, or as Apple puts it, wonderlust. So I'll spend a few minutes on flexibility, why we need it, how to measure it, and perhaps which solutions may be a fit for it. So on the why, power systems have always needed flexibility to balance the varying demand and deal with unforeseen events, right? This has been going on for a while. But now we see the rapid growth of renewables, and more importantly, the expected meteoric rise in electrification. And perhaps question for the ISOs and TSOs out here who do the planning, question for Stu and Tim, are you thinking of now recalibrating your expectations for what your electricity demand could be in 2030 and of course then in 2050, right? I'd be really interested in, there's one very eccentric billionaire who said that we could see a tripling of output in the next 2 decades, right? He does give extreme statements, but even if you have that, that's, for me at least, it's a meteoric rise. So maybe we need to recalibrate that if we're not already. The how. Right? How do you measure this, right? So perhaps by measuring the ability to cope with the variability and the uncertainty across all relevant time frames, right? We're just not looking at real time or near real time. And also perhaps it could be quantified in terms of net load dynamics and the spatial distribution of these flexibility resources. And which solutions will play a key role. I think the future net zero systems will need to harness flexibility across all levels. We'll talk about it more deeper. The power grids, will be more dynamically controlled, which I feel require more flexible operation. And I think the key thing to take away from this part is, in the midst of this whole puzzle that we're trying to solve on flexibility, is long duration flexibility an achievable goal, right? So at least as of now, one thought is that it's the missing piece in the puzzle. So if we maybe do a little introspection on flexibility, it's an umbrella term, right? I mean, everyone has different definitions. So if you categorize it perhaps in 4 areas, you look at the supply side, you look at the demand side, you look at energy storage perhaps as its own area. And then you want to look at, which I think we miss, is the flexibility of the grid itself, right? And how can that be controlled, just not on the supply side or demand side. And how does flexibility then fit in terms of all the power system characteristics that we have? You look at resilience that spans the entire time scale, to protect us from weather events, from cybersecurity, from equipment failures. But I guess it's a low probability scenario, maybe not with weather. But if you look at more of the high probability disturbances, you have reliability and stability across the time scales, with the reliability as a long-term measure and stability more as a short-term measure. And then flexibility comes in more on the short-term side of normal operations, with adequacy in terms of capacity and availability as sort of a longer-term measure. So how do we measure this, right? If you take net load as the basis for most of the calculations, then we can derive a net load ramp, perhaps, and this calculates the rate at which the net load changes over time. And once we have net load ramp, we can do something called net load mileage. We can also do required power and required energy, which then takes maximum values of the net load profile as well as the area underneath the net load curve. Most of these calculations are on the net, on the load side, but then we have grid flexibility calculations as well related to cross-border capacity ratio and the level of controllability. Just to give you one statistic, the EU has set targets of 15% for CBR, which means that your interconnection capacity needs to meet 15% of your local installed capacity. There's a lot of business for interconnection providers there, because I don't think so we're anywhere near that target if you include all the EU countries. And what I'd like to do is give you an example of the net load profile in Germany and the evolution from how the duck has been beaten enough to form a canyon, where over 15 years, and this includes some projections as well, the ramp ups and ramp downs are just staggering in the canyon, right? And you probably already heard about the canyon curve, and I think the duck is being transitioned to a canyon. Maybe they should have thought of a camel instead of a canyon, but instead of a duck. But that was an example for net load profile evolution. Keeping up in examples, let's look at, say, a net load ramp rate example. And if we are, and this is again back to Germany, if we are to look at a 100% variable resources supply case, then we may see ramp rates actually increase 5 to 8 times in the future, if we feel that most of the generation is weather dependent, solar, wind, so on and so forth. And you would need flexibility sources, right? Just not batteries. Hydrogen plays perhaps an important role. EVs, of course. And not to forget, I keep on bringing this up, a flexible grid, interconnectors, right? There's no transition without transmission, right? So, key aspect. If we go back to the 4 areas of flexibility that I talked about, spanning demand side, supply side, energy storage, and the grids, we will need technology platforms to plan, to optimize, and then of course to monetize that through trading for all these complementary sources of flexibility. Whether it's on DERs, load shedding, EV charging, inertia response, both natural and synthetic, curtailments, dispatchable generation, whatever it could come under these complementary sources. And that's where I want to leave this last slide, where flexibility spanning all the way from supply side to demand side needs solutions, technology solutions for planning, which I talked about. And if you focus more on the renewables, it's really long term for the planning side, and then more scheduling on the short term that we already do today for most of the central generation and transmission side. Of course, on the demand side, that requires more focus. Forecasting. We've talked about this. I think there were some previous presentations on this. Just look at the number of types of forecasting that would be required across, especially if you look at the demand side, inflexible demand forecast, controllable. Then you have your DER forecast. You have electricity pricing forecast. This sector right now on the distribution and demand side is so fragmented, right? I think as part of the ISOs, the TSOs, and power exchanges, they're lucky enough to have more of a centralized an organized market structure, where it's been operating pretty good for the last few years. On the demand side, there's a lot of work to do. There's so much fragmentation with aggregators, with DSOs, with independent market operators, and then requires a lot of coordination and orchestration to solve that. The trading. This particular aspect is really important for investors. Tesla has installed so many of BESSes, but their value add is not to just provide the monitoring and control. They want to monetize this as well. And how do you do that? You add a trading layer on top. They have a module called Auto Bidder that does that, just as with other companies such as Hitachi Energy and others as well. And then you have measuring and delivery. That really spans, or the different types of solutions that would be needed to cover all the different flexibility sources and activities that span from supply side to demand side. And the key takeaway from here, this is just an example of some of the Hitachi Energy products that covers this, but more importantly, I think no single vendor, I think this was pointed out before, can really complete or deliver the technology platforms needed for integrating flexibility into this. And what I feel, big tech, small tech, clean tech, green tech, we really need to come together to harmonize, collaborate, and innovate to solve these challenges. I mean, we see a lot of this already, partnerships with Microsoft, with Amazon Web Services, with Google. NVIDIA is coming up with their own software platform on top of the GPUs for the energy industry. Tesla, of course, is very big in this space, and so along with Hitachi Energy and our peers, I really feel this collaboration would really help solve a lot of the challenges. Thank you.
Thank you, Mohit. It was an interesting presentation about what are doing the vendors to contribute to energy transition. And now we are going to hear the thoughts of Todd about what can do and cannot do the markets to contribute to energy transition.
Thank you, Carlos. Flashing green light. All right, that's good. Well, as most of you know, I can work unamplified if necessary as well. So to echo what my fellow speakers have said, it's a great pleasure to be here again in another Apex conference. I was working out the other day that I think the first I attended was in 2008. So that's dating me, but to date myself even further, I'm very pleased to see so many new power exchanges and the evolution of the power exchanges. When I first started cutting my teeth in this area, there were 3 power exchanges in the world, and there are about 4 type power pools in the US, which were thinking about having markets but hadn't gotten there yet. So to see the number of markets that's expanded around the world over the last, 2.5 decades and a bit more now, it's been thrilling. And of course, so I made a career of it rather than going back and doing more boring things, and that's what's dragged me all around the world. So I'm bringing a bit of an international perspective here, being an Australian who is actually based in the US and at least at the moment seem to be doing most of my work in Europe. So so the title, as you see here, markets, what can they do and what can't they? So I was foolish enough to animate this a little bit, so I'm going to step through it. Maybe on second thought, I should have thought better of this. But if we think about what we have had classically as we built markets, we had a market where it was built around classic generators, and they were providing a market commodity, and that was electrical energy delivered in different time frames, real time, day ahead, etc. And then over time, as the markets evolved, we added various market and non-market system services. To that, sometimes co-optimized, as Marcelo was saying earlier today, some markets did that, some didn't or still don't. And some actually went on a gradual journey. I know PJM originally had them non-co-optimized and then transitioned that way. So, I've got a few examples here: reserves, frequency, reactive power being a typical non-market service, black start. But some characteristics were implicit. So if we look at what we're seeing now, we assumed that virtually every plant was dispatchable. We assumed every plant had spinning mass, that every plant was capable of forming a voltage waveform, that every plant had some form of flexibility to some extent. Some, You know, the nukes weren't very flexible, but they had some capability. So we were able to ignore those complexities. But can we anymore? And I'll come to that in a second. We also had other assumptions, that demand was mostly passive, but it was predictable. That things going on at the distribution level, for the most part, could be treated as one homogeneous mass, which we could just try and run forecasts over, and we didn't need to sort of peer through or down into that system. And then we could simplify locational challenges, so we didn't need to worry about absolutely where in the system things were going on. At least we thought that initially. And obviously, as time went on, some of these things, we could treat them as TSO problems. TSO will address it. But what's happening now? How does that bring us to our current situation? Well, you know, if we look at the characteristics that were implicit, one of my great mentors, a guy called Larry Ruff, who would be known to some of you. Larry, back before he retired, spoke at this conference quite often. He had a great saying that markets should be as simple as possible, but no simpler. And so we're now seeing that we have a need to start explicitly defining some of those things that were implicit. But as we do that, we also see that fewer resources can actually provide these explicit services than used to be able to provide them. So that creates other problems. You know, so market constructs, you know, we have to look at what constructs need to evolve, for example, to provide services such as inertia. But now we run into a problem that says, well, we don't seem to have a lot of providers of that, so do we start running into issues like market power issues? I mean, in many cases too, there's only one logical buyer. So do we have a real market when more of the market is coming out of energy and going over into system services, as it tends to be called now, but there's really only a monopsony buyer for most system services? Or can we, as we start to evolve, start to formulate a market that actually has a plurality of buyers as well as a plurality of sellers? These are some of the challenges we need to look at. We're certainly seeing that demand is going to have to shoulder more of the burden going forward, that the flexibility we used to expect to get out of generation, well, the system's still got to be balanced, so someone's got to do it, and if the generators aren't, then the demand is going to have to. This is obviously going to make distributed energy resources also more important, driving a need, and back when I was at PJM, working on strategic development, we asked ourselves this question a lot. What are the phases of our understanding of DER and the role we should be playing in it? And it starts, with observability, just understanding the nature of what's out there. We can no longer treat it just as a black box in the distribution system. The next step being controllability, and then after that, optimization. Can we start to optimize what's going on there? I'm still very hopeful that we're going to evolve into solutions, that have interesting things, whether it ends up being flexibility markets or, I think, things like sub-wholesale LMPs and the like, starting to create price signals right down at lower levels in the system. And that comes then to this final point. It's not just a matter of what, but where this is provided. And Marcelo touched on this again in his remarks earlier about storage. We're also seeing issues in the investment time frame. So renewables, we're finding that renewables are proliferating, but they need to go where resource potential is highest. I mean, you can't put wind farms right in a wind lull. It needs to go where you've actually got the wind blowing through. As a result, we're seeing, even though we have brownfield sites, that they can't be terribly well used by a lot of the new renewables coming online. Now, this is creating, amongst other things, a need for extensive transmission build-out. I've called that a non-market cost. There was a bit of discussion earlier today about the possibility of markets around the building of transmission and all that. For someone who survived the merchant transmission wars let's say I'm not as hopeful as some about this being driven by market-based responses. Not a lot of projects started as merchant transmission projects, but didn't end as merchant transmission projects. And I can see Stu smiling here. So it's often driven by central planning rather than market forces. Personally, I mean, I'd love to see it done by a market, but I can't say I'm holding my breath on it. Most renewables still require subsidies to be investable, and this is important. We keep talking about, renewables are cheap, they're cheaper than other sources, but if you look at the total cost of life, if you don't have things in there like portfolio standards or RECs or emissions permits or tax credits or one of the many other externalities, then they're still not investable. But what's this doing in terms of the investment time frame? Well, those externalities actually suppress the energy price, and we're also seeing that they're suppressing capacity prices. And by the way, that is the intent. The intent is to encourage renewables by making them appear in the market cheaper than other sources, and therefore it's taking away investment incentive for those other sources. But again, if we're trying to run a grid, that has implications. So, and we're seeing this. What we're seeing is a disorderly transition. Now, this picture here is actually from an AEMO report earlier this year. AEMO is the Australian Energy Market Operator. And you'll see that their standard for capacity reliability is the unserved energy. And you'll see they're projecting in the next few years that virtually every state in Australia is going to go through its cap or its target for unserved energy unless there's some urgent building of capacity. So based upon what they know in the system, this is derived from an update to what they call their statement of opportunities, and that reflects what they know that is being built, but it doesn't reflect stuff that might still be brought to market. But you can see there's not a very long runway there. Now, I did these slides before AEMO actually published a new statement of opportunities about a week ago. It looks worse. That graph has gone worse. So, and that's a report you can find online, by the way. So we're starting to see that we're getting problems with investment in states like New South Wales in Australia now. One of the coal plants that was due to come offline in 2025, it looks like the New South Wales state government are literally just going to pay out-of-market payments to stay in. So again, this starts to affect the markets that we operate. We're seeing in multi-jurisdiction markets like Australia and PJM how the incentives in some territories and not in other territories are distorting the price differences across the markets and creating a form of balkanisation. And then that results in calls for even further subsidies. So we went from having RECs, renewable electricity certificates, to having ZECs now, which are zero emission certificates to subsidise nuclear plants, and on it goes. And also because of the disorderly transition, now we're starting to see that, at least as a temporary measure, we're going to have to subsidise thermal plant to keep it in. So it's not a happy story. Yeah, I'm going to, I'm mindful of my time. But how do markets respond? Well, I'm reminded that I've also done a fair bit of work in the futures markets and have a concept there of product maintenance. And so, for example, if you think about probably the first tradable energy product was the New York Mercantile's New York Harbour heating oil number 2 contract. And that was in the 70s that contract was launched. It doesn't even exist nowadays because ongoing product maintenance means you have to keep changing the standards as appropriate to have the product that the market needs. So it's now an ultra-low sulfur diesel contract. So we need to do the same. We need to modify our products as the market evolves. So, I've actually, I jumped ahead of myself before. This is Larry Ruff's quote. So I do think we should follow the principle that we want to keep as much activity in the primary energy market as we can. And so what we're seeing in places is, for example, the shortening of settlement timeframes, so that rather than having an ancillary service to deal with ramping problems, we go to 5-minute settlement instead to do that. Now, All the US markets have been mandated to do that by FERC. Australia's also done it. A number are heading in that direction. The markets should incent the attributes that we need to have in there, but not specific technologies. And this, again, we heard that same thing this morning. Who's to predict what the technologies of the future are that we need? What we need to do is be flexible enough to let those technologies at least reflect their physical limitations, so that can be reflected in the algorithm. But so how is this playing out in actual markets, and what are the issues? So, the markets we're involved in, we could see that there are new products being defined around things like inertia, around fast frequency response, firming to correct for forecast errors, so literally a firming product that's sort of a substitute for the forecast errors that we're seeing in both in intermittent generation, particularly actually, and then also in load. However, as I was discussing earlier, there's not many providers of certain products, so this gives us issues with liquidity, it gives us issues with market power. It gives us issues because we're putting more of the activity out of the energy market into system services markets, where there's often only one logical buyer. The changes to the energy market to incent dynamic and other characteristics we talked about, 5-minute settlement just a second ago, nodal pricing. I mean, I'm loath to open up the old nodal versus zonal wars, but I'm going to. I like to think of it this way. I've never seen a market move from nodal to zonal. I've seen plenty of them move the other way. And we're seeing even in Europe, which is, historically had a bit of an attitude that, we don't want any of those crazy Anglo-Saxon inventions here. There's been still some pretty big champions now for starting to move to more granular pricing. I mean, if you talk to PSE in Poland, they'll bend your ear off talking about it. But even guys like Laurent Schmidt, the former head of NSOE, has been a very big champion of this over the years. I think it's an historical inevitability, but no, in Europe it's not going to happen quickly, but it's going to happen. Now, there is a real issue that if we've now got 7, 8, 10 system services products plus energy, this makes the markets more and more complex. Does it make it difficult for participants to actually play in those markets? You only have the most sophisticated participants. So it is going to be a challenge. I think the days of sort of the guy who sets up in his garage and puts out a shingle is sort of disappearing. And I think it's disappearing of its own volition anyway when we look at some of the things that were happening in Britain with the energy spikes and the number of retailers who went bust. I think there is going to be a higher threshold to participate in energy trading. We're seeing flexibility markets, but there's no common definition of these things. If you even go onto like the NSOE sites, every place that has one or is trying to build one has got a different definition. Some are just at the distribution level, some are at distribution transmission. How do they each reconcile if the TSO and the DSO have needs, and what if those needs are conflicting? I'm not sure whether that's the right long-term solution. I do think it will be an interim solution, though. And and we're seeing further capacity market redesign around the world. Some that are successful and some that fail. Australia made another attempt at a capacity market that did not get up and going. We're certainly seeing issues about what is capacity, how's it defined, who's eligible. So let me move on. I'm going to throw just an interesting sort of thought out here. It's something I've discussed with a couple of our clients. So consider disparate regions around the world connected by data lines, but that aren't electrically connected. We've got less controllable generation, so as I was saying earlier, the balancing item is likely to be demand. And we're talking earlier about data centres. Data centre demand is incredibly important. It's becoming an increasing amount of the load on the grid. In fact, if you look at new large loads connecting in many parts of the world, it's not aluminium smelters, or for the Americans amongst us, aluminum smelters. It's things like data centres. And yet at the same time, we know they're also very flexible loads. And for the data centres I've talked to, you know, they pretty much have estimated energy is about 30% of their costs. Their servers and maintaining and replacing them is about 30% of their costs. Their people is about 30% of their costs. And their data, the actual lines, the communications lines, about 10% of their costs. So this starts to create an interesting scenario that, based upon what's happening with energy flexibility and with pricing and the price signals you get, that you might displace your processing load. And you do see that within markets. And I'm sure Tim could talk about this better than I can, but you know, even during my time at PJM, you could actually watch data centre load move to different nodes. But we now have this possibility that we will displace to markets in entirely different places. So you might have load, and we were doing some work for Landsnet a while back, who's the system operator in Iceland of all places, and they've got a lot of data centres. They have 7 big customers in Iceland, of which 4 of them are data centres. And they're starting to see that too, that as the costs change, that you get displacement. So this brings the interesting possibility that now the flexible item, which is the marginal price, is now linked between electrically unconnected markets. So we might actually see pricing in one part of the world impact pricing in another part of the world by the displacement of demand, and yet there's no electrical interconnection between those places. So I'll just throw that out for you as sort of an interesting piece of food for thought about how, you know, back to the thesis of this about how markets might evolve in response to what's happening in the energy transition. Juan Carlos.
Thank you, Todd. I'm especially impressed about the virtual global market you are mentioning at the end of your presentation. Well, I have some questions for you, dear panelists. I want to start with Tim. And what step is PJM taking to help facilitate energy transition?
Thanks, Juan Carlos. There is a lot going on within the PJM community and for this energy transition. We started this probably like multiple years ago. PJM first, we developed several papers to really first look at the baseline of where we are. What are the expectations going into the future from a PJM perspective, technology, capacity, what would be there. Multiple papers we came up with. We've gotten to the point now where we're actually taking some initiatives towards that, some of the areas we've been looking at. We have several stakeholder groups, one associated with our capacity market, you know, valuing capacity, looking at contributions of capacity on our system to make sure that we're appropriately modeling correctly. We got a reserve certainty task force where we're looking at more reliability services, reserves, make sure we're pricing reserves appropriately. Part of that challenge is, or any of our challenges are, you know, dealing with our stakeholders and also dealing with FERC. We've had many optimal, perfect solutions, we would say, from a markets perspective put out there. One of them, for example, looking at reserves, a slope demand curve for reserves versus a step curve, where we can value reserves where they provide above and beyond what's needed, but we had the FERC denied that, so we're still looking at a step function where anything over the reserves we need pretty much doesn't have value, so we're not really providing the incentives for those reserves. So we need to improve that. We need to improve the performance for our reserve market. But there's other areas like Todd's talking to. He's looking at a level here with these data centers. It's almost like a market under a market with data center. But I think we need to get there first where we can utilize these data centers to have more flexibility in our market, where we're seeing in PJM data centers are being put up behind nuclear generators. And first shot, you look at that and say, ooh, that's kind of scary. Like, what are you, behind a nuclear unit? You don't want to mess with a nuclear unit. Well, you're not messing with it. Those nuclear units are full output the whole time. But what happens is they're serving the data center load depending on the curtailment costs that they could put within their bids into the market. And then if we need those nuclear resources, the megawatts associated with them, they can quickly curtail that demand, the data center load. So it's really a demand function in that point. But we haven't gotten there yet. We haven't gotten in PJM where we've integrated that into the market. So that's something that we'd like to get there. But I think perhaps the most important thing is price formation initiatives in general. You know, we're a key component of the prices are going to drive investments. If you put the right prices out there, the incentives will be there. If you have the right prices out there for supply side, the incentives will be there. Eventually, the prices could increase if necessary, and the demand will come in automatically if the prices are correct. But we're just not there, and it's so hard to get over that hump of what type of initiatives can be there. So we have a lot of stakeholder processes in there. I can certainly go through any in detail, but on a high level, that's some of the areas we've been looking at.
Thank you. Mohit, you are representative of a vendor, and vendors are an important part of the ecosystem of energy transition. And because you have the role of promoting innovation in the industry. How grid flexibility technologies enable the integration of variable renewable energy resources?
Yeah, thanks, Juan. I think from a vendor perspective, what I said in my presentation on partnerships and trying to close the gaps, I don't think so any single vendor can do that. Leveraging what big tech and other technology companies have done related to data harnessing and using AI as an enabler is definitely one partnership approach, rather than trying to reinvent it within our own industry technologies. But remember, AI is just an enabler, right? Our forecasting solutions have been using neural network forecasting this is since the 1970s, right? What has changed, right? Performance, the computing capacity, maybe a little more creation or innovation on the algorithms from what our folks do, what our peers do in the technology industry. So I think we have the know-how, we're getting the computing performance. I think the marriage between what has been done and what can be done between us and the new and the big tech folks is I think one of the ways to go forward.
Thank you. Jeff, you have mentioned in your presentation the relevance of financial sustainability for markets. And how can markets and exchange promote the provision of ancillary services from diverse range of market participants, including renewable energy generators and demand response providers?
I think I'll start. That's a big topic. I used to say that there was what we call a watering hole in Folsom, California, that you'd walk in and behind the bar it said, free drinks tomorrow. That's how I characterized demand response for a long time. But I think the best thing markets can do, and a lot of this has been touched on, and that is the transparency and the lowering of barriers to entry to the markets. So, because if you have innovation that's happening, that at some level, that innovation has to generate revenue. And so we've talked about incentivizing technologies requirements rather than technologies, and that's great. There's an inherent tension in that was mentioned earlier, because in order to extract the maximum value out of a given technology, you may have to leverage qualities that technology has that nothing else does, right? So battery storage has certain characteristics that make it valuable for short-term regulation and then short-term reserves and those sorts of things that maybe demand response doesn't have. So it's difficult to do that. And there's a tendency to make things more complicated to try and allow for a wider range and a wider breakdown of services to be provided. But you reach a point of diminishing returns where the market complexity just expands to the point where providers and potential providers, A, they can't understand it, and B, from the standpoint of actually accessing the market and managing the issues that are related to participation, those become barriers to competition. So you go back to Todd's statement, the markets need to be as simple as possible, but no simpler. I think that should be a mantra everywhere. And I think that, that we need to continue to think along terms and provide effort toward the idea that it doesn't take a genius to make something that's very complicated. It takes a genius in a genius organization to make something that's simple. And so striving toward a simple, elegant solution that attracts participants that can provide services to the markets is really what we should all be thinking about, regardless of what our markets look like today or what we want them to look like tomorrow. The idea is to be, if you want to put it that way, as democratic as possible, in the sense that everybody has a chance to participate in the market if they can bring value. And I think that's where we want to go with that. And again, I think that what we should value is the simplicity that we can build into a market while still supporting the types of innovation and the types of resources that that we need to have. So, granted that you have a political aspect, I call it a political aspect, it's a stakeholder aspect that also applies, and sometimes you need patience to allow all the stakeholders to weigh in and allow the solution to appear that, that does balance the interests of the regulators, the interests of the generators, the interests of the power users down to the retail level. So there are a lot of conflicting interests here. It's a difficult problem. But I think we've, quite honestly, I see a lot of progress. And then now I'm going to talk all night. You got me started. What can I tell you? What does lie underneath the radar is that the regulators and governments do have a role to play when the markets can't provide the incentives they need. And that tends to be technology specific to a certain level, but a lot of the build out in California was due to the regulators saying, thou shalt buy solar. You know, I mean, that was essentially the, and so, and what that resulted in was a large build out of solar that now we, in California, occasionally we get to 100%, right? And if the public, and if there's a general consensus that it's worth plowing public money into a build out that we subsidize, then, you know, I don't have a lot of problem with that. In an ideological sense, it's nice to have the markets do that, but we don't necessarily have the time to wait for that. So there's an aspect there that you need to consider. So again, many, many different competing interests. As they say, sometimes you don't want to see the sausage made, but that's what we're doing here. So, thank you.
Thank you, Jeff. Todd, you mentioned that market constructs must evolve to properly compensate those resources that can provide services that will be required in the future, including inertia, frequency regulation, voltage support, and ramping capabilities. What might some of those market constructs be?
How long is a piece of string? Let me talk about some of the things we're seeing. You know, if we talk about ramping, that's an interesting one because some markets are trying to encourage ramping by keeping as much in energy as possible. Also, for example, the move towards 5-minute settlement, and to also have more granular locational signals. So, and that to me personally is my preferred solution to those problems, because you maintain the liquidity in the market, you maintain the plurality of buyers and sellers. We are seeing other markets though in places like Europe, for example in Ireland, where they are looking at more explicit fast frequency response products to get the quality of ramping that they need. If we talk about inertia as another example, or rate of change of frequency as it's also referred to, we are starting to see markets that are wanting to explicitly define inertia products. So, who can provide what rate of change of frequency and what sort of technologies are they using for that. I do think some markets in their planning are putting too much faith in synthetic inertia at the moment. I mean, it's probably going to come at some point, but it hasn't really made its way out of a university lab yet. And I think specifically about Australia when it comes to that, some of their forward planning is highly reliant upon synthetic inertia products. There is a question, if you define the right characteristics, what can provide it? But part of it must be also, any market has to have that verifiability of the product as well. You must prove it can provide what it says on the tin. But I think we are going to see more explicit identification of that, because you think about the counterpoint. The counterfactual to this is if we don't define inertia products, we're going to start losing more and more spinning mass off the system, because there's not a lot of incentive for it to stay around. If you own a generator and someone's applying externality, subsidies, then your revenues are dropping. And so you're sitting there going, well, I've got all the incentive in the world telling me that I'm needing to get out of business in the next few years. I'll take that hint. I'll stop maintaining my plant. You'll see that start to fade away unless, at least for the most flexible of the plants, think about things like open cycle gas turbines. If there's not something else giving them incentive to stay in, through an explicit payment for a service, then they're going to come out. And I think that is worrying in terms of, for all the, especially for the exchanges here who are also system operators. That's quite a frightening proposition to start losing that flexibility out of the system.
Thank you, Doug. I think we have some time for some questions from the audience. Is there any question?
Thank you very much. My question is related to measuring the firm capacity contribution of the generators, and it's quite related to this discussion. Tim, you talked about that PJM is now focusing on accurately measuring the firm capacity contributions. Would you like to share your experience, any learnings or challenges that you have faced?
Thanks for the question. One of the major focuses we're looking at, and we seem to have pretty good stakeholder consensus on it, would be, in our capacity market, how can we make sure that the capacity credits we provide them is a function of what they can actually provide in the energy market. So we're looking at providing, we call it the ELCC model, where it's looking at the capacity contribution of each technology type. We're actually going to that level to say, hey, from the model and input into our market, what do we expect from these, like a wind resource or a different type of resource in the future, and how can they get capacity revenues based off of that? And I think that's a good traction, it's a good method. We used to have it more on we have it more on like a system-wide level, where we derate capacity on a system level based on like all renewable type resources or stuff like that. Now we're looking at more on a capacity level or technology type level, which I think it's more of an accurate model, which is one of the most important things as we do this energy transition is what is our model, what's the inputs to our model, that they're accurate, so that when we do actually clear the market, in this case the capacity market, we are having a good, reliable contribution from these resources in the future. We're looking 3 years out in the future in our capacity market, so it makes it fairly important there.
Can you briefly discuss the inputs of this model? What inputs that it considers?
Yeah, so I think it looks at, and I'm not the expert in modeling of from our planning resources, but it looks at technology type. It'll look at historical performance of these type of resources based on the years, forecasting of weather conditions depending on the type of technology, and all gets put in this like statistical model, and they determine based on that, or they are planning folks with some of the resources they have, okay, this is the expectation. And it gets refined on a yearly or periodic basis. We'll refine that to determine, okay, well, what are those contributions? But what'll happen is as we clear more of a resource going into time, so let's say as additional, I'll call out wind, for example. Let's say we have 10% wind and it increases to 50, 60, 100%. Their contribution is going to get lower and lower into what we expect because now we have an oversupply of them, so they're not going to get 100% contribution. So that comes into play in that area too.
Hello, my name is Mohammed Hamad from GCIA. Regarding the emerging market, for example, the new markets coming up, as you mentioned that there is challenge in having markets, and when now emerging markets looking forward to the coming to the hour or to the delivery time more, and ancillary service on the other side also it is working from the TSO side that's to deliver it. It is now is the thought that it's better to have it in one system to at least look to different zone of the market, because sometimes it will come in the time it is very near to each other, and especially we have ambitious plan in the GCC region. We will have a massive of renewable capacity and so on, other products. So what do you suggest for that from your perspective?
So I would say this is another version of the complex old question, should ISOs and power exchanges be combined into one organisation or be separate? I'm going to try and slightly avoid stepping on that landmine and talk around it a bit. If we see even in Europe right now, the balancing markets are actually run by the TSOs. I mean, obviously, the closer you come to the time of physical delivery, the more you have to make sure that any market solution is actually producing numbers that are physically deliverable. So when you then look at what tend to be called system services now, because I suppose there's the school of thought is saying so much more of the economic value of the market is going to go into these services that treating them as just ancillary now is probably not appropriate. They're just services other than energy that are going to be provided. I think the same thing has to apply with those, that they have to be, if you're going to have a market in them, it cannot be divorced from the physical reality of what it takes to operate the system. So then the question comes, well, at what time frame then, if you're talking then about forward timeframes, even what I'd call cash markets like day ahead, that they're not spot because they're not on the barrel at the time of delivery, but they are. By the time you actually settle those markets, the energy's gone, so they're a cash market. You can make that work by having a separate power exchange, but if those solutions are too unphysical, then you just leave the problem to the TSO to sort out in real time. So, I've always preferred that the forward markets had some bearing or take some account of what the physical underlying reality is, because otherwise you've got a market that eventually reaches a point of gate closure, and then the TSOs run around and scramble trying to balance up the system to do all the things that the market didn't do. But you have seen two different models. Clearly in Europe it comes down to a point, and they're actually talking about moving the gate closure even closer to the time of operations. I think that is somewhat worrisome to me from the point of view of a system security point of view. it's gone the other way in the US. In fact, Paul's here from Nodal Exchange. I mean, they've gone where even their futures market is designed around taking account of the signals that come out of the spot market locationally. You know, I have a feeling that the long-term evolution, especially with what we're going to have to do around the transition, it's going to require us to understand things more in a more granular fashion. It's more likely to go in that direction, in my opinion.
Thank you. Dr. Cecilia has the last question.
Okay, thank you. So the panel is about what markets can do and can do. So I wonder if you would like to discuss what the markets can do about developing these new technologies like hydrogen, making storage, pumped storage efficient, and all this long list that keeps growing about ancillary services efficient.
Yeah, who wants to answer and add what we can do about grid-forming inverters? Because everybody is talking about grid-forming inverters, but Mohit, when we ask vendors, they don't really have, they don't really know how to supply grid-forming inverters, plus batteries, of course. Yeah.
Yeah, I'll talk about it just from the market perspective and then maybe cover the technology perspective. I mean, I come at this from a somewhat purist point of view. You know, I don't think it's the job of markets to pick winners. It's the job of markets to balance supply and demand. So we need to define what we think we need, and that becomes the demand, and then provide enough. And that should, if properly formulated, and of course good market design isn't a given, but good market design should then create enough revenue for someone to innovate around what those requirements are. So if we think we need certain characteristics in the grid, we need to define what those things are. If we don't define it, but we still think we need it, then we're taking out-of-market solutions then, and that's picking winners. And you know, I think historically we've proven that regulators and governments are lousy at picking winners. You know, in Australia, when we first set up the first incentive schemes to encourage renewable energy, all the reports said, oh yeah, we'll set this scheme up and virtually everything that comes and takes these RECs is going to be biomass. So it's all going to be landfill gas. None of it was. It will end up being wind. And then, so the second round, all the predictions were like, oh, well, we need to set ourselves up for wind because it's all going to be wind in this next round. It was all solar. I mean, what we've proven is that, yet again, government and regulators can't pick this stuff. The best thing actually was just to set the scheme up, create the incentive you want, and let the market provide as best it can. I really think that's all we can do as markets is set them up and try to make them as free from distortion as possible. And then let the chips fall where they may.
We have 1 minute if you want to add something.
I was going to add a quick
Tim?
comment to Todd. Yeah, I totally agree the markets are the best way to do that, but there are other ways, nuggets that, like PGM, for example, we have a applied innovation group, a group dedicated or committees dedicated to innovation where we can sponsor certain new technologies, for example, dynamic line ratings, where they can come in, we'll facilitate how that could work as more like a parallel effort in the market and eventually potential integration. So we do try to provide some opportunities on a limited basis. So there are some nuggets that the markets can help with and exchanges too.
Thank you. You have, if you want to add something, Mohit, do we have?
Yeah, really quick, you know, from a technology perspective, you know, we've seen the optimization problem sort of increase in scale and complexity. If you know, rewind a few years back, we started integrating demand response, started integrating energy storage. Now we're integrating DERs full scale into you know, capacity, energy, and ancillary service markets. And then at the same time, incorporate these new system services that Todd keeps on talking about. You know, in Ireland, ERCOT has seen a deluge of even National Grid in the UK every few months there's a new product coming in. And as a technology vendor, we have to, be ready for integrating that and at least meeting that future scale. And that will be, of course, decided by the market, how liquid these products are and how well traded they are. But we have to be ready.
Thank you. Thank you, dear panelists. It has been a very fruitful discussion with very good questions from the audience. Now we can take a picture with you, please.
Okay.
Thank you very much. One more time. Bir fotoğraf çekimini gerçekleştirelim. Yes, it's here. So thank you very much, Mr. Omedo, and our distinguished panelists. Ladies and gentlemen, one more time, give it up for our distinguished speakers, and thank you very much. It's been a really very fruitful panel, the second panel and the last panel of the day. And Tim, I apologize for the mispronunciation of your last name. It's Horger.
I didn't even notice.
Okay. Thank you very much. So, ladies and gentlemen, this concludes day one of APEX 2023 Istanbul Conference. So, may I kindly ask you to give a big, big round of applause for all the speakers of today, one more time, for their great contribution to the first day of our conference. We had the opening speeches by our distinguished chairman, and also the deputy minister has honored us for the opening of our conference. Our partners have shared their experiences and know-how, and with Bright Sparks presentations, we're also horizon opening, and with the two panels touching upon the crucial topics of the industry, our moderators and panelists have communicated their ideas and practices, and we also had a special session welcoming our new member as well in the afternoon. So we hope it was a productive and beneficial day for you all. Before we leave, some quick information about the rest of the day. We will meet at the hotel lobby in about 10-15 minutes. At 3:30 is the meeting time at the lobby, and then we will depart for Topkapı Palace. You will enjoy an unforgettable tour at the Topkapı Palace Museum with our professional guides as well. You'll be visiting the treasury of the Ottoman Empire, holy relics, and also the harem sections of Topkapı Palace. After a 2-hour tour, in a 5-minute walking distance, we will meet at Istanbul Archaeological Museum this time for our gala dinner hosted by AWS, Amazon Web Services. And after the gala dinner, transfers will be arranged back to the hotel. An important reminder for the ladies, so I strongly recommend you to wear some comfortable shoes rather than high heels, because it's going to be quite a walk at Topkapı Palace Museum. And tomorrow, on day 2, we will have 3 more panels coming up for you in addition to the presentations of our Gold Partner and Bright Sparks spotlights as well. We will begin at 9 a.m. sharp tomorrow. So, thank you very much. Enjoy the museums, and see you at the gala dinner. Goodbye.